It's chaos.
It's a different type of Sunday scary.
It's your newest obsession.
It's Dirty Driving, a Formula One podcast.
We're the Hornsby sisters. I'm Katie.
And I'm Megan.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back to yet another episode of Dirty Driving. This weekend was a bye week, so today we are deep diving.
This deep dive is brought to you by Mercedes, featuring Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. And unfortunately, I'm going to start it off by torturing Katie.
Oh, no. What game do you have for me this round?
So last night, when I was not prepping for this episode, I'll be fully transparent and honest, I was finishing up a Formula One romance novel. I don't even care to admit that. I don't even care. I was mulling over the thought of the fact that this weekend is not only Mercedes' home race, but it's Lewis, George, Lando's home race, but it's technically also McLaren, Williams, and Aston Martin's home race. When you really think about what's happening this weekend, I was like, oh, fuck. And then I was like, it's also the 4th of July, America's independence from Britain. And I care way more about what's happening in Britain than anything that's happening in the United States.
I think that's fair.
So in honor of all of these realizations in the middle of the night, I decided I'm going to torture Katie. It's a little fun, harmless torturing. But like I said, this weekend is some big home races. We got 3 British drivers on the grid. So in a world where we don't worry about a Red Bull Ferrari success, do we want Hamilton, Russell, or Norris to win? Like, this is an impossible question.
I can't believe you're asking me this.
Right at the top, too.
Well, hear me out. I love Lewis. He has won at home, so he has felt that glory. George, I'd be happy to see win, but I think if, I could choose not thinking about what cars they're in, not thinking about how the season has gone thus far, I would love to see a Lando Norris home victory.
But, hear me out. Hear me out. I, too, would love to see that happen. But does Lewis Hamilton arguably need this more than the other two need their first win? I know, your brain. Does he need this, second, infusion of, this car is not a shitbox? She literally is so deep in thought. She's looking up to the sky for inspiration. Let me narrate this thought process.
I would be fine with Lewis winning. I think he does need another jump start. But he's already won at home. Can we see someone else? I think George and Lewis have way more of a shot of winning than Lando does.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're talking fictitious world.
Yeah, absolutely. One of them could take home the victory, but what if none of them take home the victory at home?
Okay, wait. We're not done with this process.
Okay, sorry. No.
But seriously, if you really isolated, outside of your feelings about how much you love Lando, if it's their first F1 win and it's their home Grand Prix, who should get it? Should it be George or should it be Lando? Who can we defer a year?
Honestly, I feel this is just me shooting the shit. I really don't know, but I feel like George is slightly more patriotic towards his home country. I don't know why I have those feelings, but I have those feelings about it. So I would love to see George win if it's between George and Lando. If it's between all of them, I'm going Lando. If it's between George and Lando, I'm going Lando. I mean, George, sorry.
My issue with Lando is he dropped... Okay, so George Russell didn't drop home race merch from what I can see online. Lando did, and yet I'm just still McLaren. I understand you like that font, but it is not a good font.
I haven't seen it.
It is not a good font. Not for merch. I don't know. There's something about the font that's okay, it's cool on the walls, but on clothing, it looks like a little too, I don't know, Canva-y, if I will go that far.
I'm looking it up right now. His home merch?
Yeah, like his British Grand Prix merch. I saw it on TikTok, I'll be honest.
All right, I'll have to look at it later.
It's that like LN4 stuff in that font that McLaren's been using all year.
Okay, well, you know, we don't. I got nothing to say about that.
Okay, last torturing question, last one. Okay, and then I'll leave you alone.
There's another one.
Yeah, like I'm just gonna just.
Okay.
You might as well. Like I'm already on this.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, home race. You get to be at Silverstone. Do you want to be in the garage or the paddock? No, we're going garage. Full stop. You're in the garage. Would you rather be in there with Mercedes or would you rather be in there with McLaren?
Okay. These are foul questions. How am I supposed to answer this?
I don't care.
I like both of them. Can I split my time? You're gonna say no. So
no, you can't split your time. You're
who would
cheating
I rather
now.
be with? Who would I rather be with? Who would I rather just for this race, right?
Yes, because it's their home Grand Prix. Like that's the whole point. Like, who do you want to celebrate their home Grand Prix with?
Mercedes, because there's both of them. So I've got a 66.6% chance of celebrating because I've got 2 for 1 versus if I go McLaren, then I've only got Lando.
She's literally cheating and I'm just going to allow it to happen.
You said Mercedes or McLaren and I chose Mercedes.
And then she's like, well, I'm just going to statistically break it down and just decide who has a better chance of winning. Like that's whatever. I'm giving
whatever. Yeah, Miss, let me ask you all these hard questions at the end of your day.
I'm going Lewis because the doctor's office only had purple gauze. And so I'm like, well, I feel like it's a Lewis weekend, just like it was that Ferrari weekend way back.
He might eke it out and win. Like,
I mean, it's not going to happen.
Never say never.
Okay,
what
Justin
if we finally
Bieber.
have the
Let's
double,
get into it.
What if we finally have the double DNF between Ferrari and Red Bull?
You know what, Justin Bieber? Get to talking about Lewis, who's besties with Justin. Remember that from whatever Monaco Grand Prix we watched, and Justin Bieber suddenly showed up, and we were both like,
"Why the hell is Justin Bieber there?" Yeah, who knows?
That was like, what was that? Like 2017? That was the one. That was the year of Danny Rick.
2018.
2018. It was 2018, and Katie and I were watching it. And we were like, "Oh,
why is
Justin drinking
Bieber
champagne?" Which, by the way, you can totally tell that was pre-pandemic because Justin and Lewis both drank from the champagne bottle, and I was like, ugh.
Ugh, gross. Whatever. Okay. I have the honor of talking about one of my all-time idols, Lewis Hamilton. I'm going to jump right in of how he started with karting and motorsport way back in the day. His father actually bought him a go-kart for Christmas when he was 6 years old and promised to support him in karting if he continued to do well in school. So one of those, if you do this, then you can have this moments that our parents normally offer to us. So in 1993, he began karting and quickly began winning races and cadet class championships and actually became... A couple of years later, became the youngest driver to win the British Cadet Racing Championship at just age 10. And after this win, Hamilton approached Ron Dennis, who, if you don't know who Ron Dennis is, he is tied to McLaren, at the Autosport Awards and said, "I won the British Championship, and one day I want to be racing in your cars." 3 years later, in 1998, Dennis called Hamilton following his second Super 1 Series and British Championship wins to basically offer Lewis a role in the McLaren Development Driver Program. And the contract actually included an option at a future F1 seat. And I'm like 99.9% positive that he is one of the youngest people to ever be awarded a contract that did have that option for a future F1 seat. So just another one of the many records that this man holds in the world of Formula One.
I mean, you have to have some huge balls to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, he did the right thing because now we've got Lewis Hamilton, and I'm going to go through his long list of records here in a minute and talk about them a little bit more because when I was typing them up, I was like, how can I not share all of these? But don't worry, I'll make quick work of it. In 1999, he raced in the Intercontinental A program. And then in 2000, he joined Formula A, becoming the European champion in 2000 with all of the points, with maximum points. So really just worked his way through and continued to show improvement and wins year after year. He began car racing in the 2001 British Formula Renault Winter Series, finishing fifth, which led to a full 2002 Formula Renault UK campaign with Manor Motorsport, where he finished third overall. He clinched the championship the next year and missed the last two races of the season to make his debut in the season finale of the British Formula 3 Championship. So jumped his way up and debuted for Manor in the 2004 F3 Euro Series, where he ended fifth. He first tested for McLaren in the late 2004 at Silverstone, where he moved to the reigning Euro Series championship with ASM for 2005 and dominated, winning 15 out of 20 rounds. He moved to the sister team, the sister GP2 team, Art Grand Prix, for the 2006 season and won the championship in his first attempt, coinciding with the opening with McLaren at the 2007 season. His first season, he set numerous records in Formula One, finishing only 1 point behind the leader, Kimi Räikkönen. He had the most consecutive podium finishes from debut with 9, the most wins in the debut season with 4, and the most season points in the debut season with 104. So his first season in F1 was foreshadowing all of the greatness to come in his years following his first season. So I mean, I was blown away typing all of this up and reading about it. And if I didn't already have the highest amount of respect for him as I possibly could for a person, the level of respect has just increased. And that was the year, actually, that Hamilton and Alonso were involved in a number of incidents, which resulted in some tensions between the team, and the drivers and the team. And we're waiting for the tell-all book from Hamilton once he stops racing to give us more of the details about his relationship with Alonso and then later his relationship with Nico Rosberg. So,
I mean, he has to hate him, right? They hate him.
We need that book. I will be waiting. I will not die until I get to read Lewis Hamilton's point of view of his time in Formula One, because he has to have all the tea.
I honestly want, like, in 1 year, I want Alonso, Hamilton, and Nico to drop them at the same time and then just be like, let the public decide, like a little Hunger Games of which story is really true.
Oh, I would love that. And I would stay up all night and read all three of them. I think I would go chapter by chapter, like
annotating them. Like, this is a contradiction. This is a contradiction. Interesting that Lewis thought it this way and Alonso thought it this way. Yeah. I hope that they actually don't. In a weird way, I kind of like that they don't like each other.
Oh, yeah. There's got to be some sort of rivalry and competition. I mean, there's 20 of them. They can't all like each other.
No, they can't like each other, and I get, like, having a level of respect on the track, but, like, I'm sorry, when you leave the track, there's no way you want to hang out with all 20.
Yeah, no. Some of them don't even follow each other on Instagram, so.
Iconic. What an interesting turn of events. Like, that is the biggest FU these days, is like, I don't follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be something. Okay, so back to lovely Lewis. His second season, he became the then youngest driver to win the World Drivers' Championship after making a crucial overtake in the last lap of the last race of the season. So phenomenal showing from him just year after year. He spent the following 4 years with McLaren before moving to Mercedes in 2013. And again, I'm going to kind of jump over all of his championship wins because I feel like, A, most people know that he has won that many years in a row, and B, I really want to talk more about all of the records that he holds. So He got consecutive titles in 2014 and 2015 during the rivalry that I mentioned with Nico Rosberg. And then he overturned the points twice with Vettel mid-season in 2017 and 2018 to claim victory. And then he continued to take the 2019 and 2020 drivers' championships. So 7 in total, matching the great Michael Schumacher. And for most of us, he actually has won 8, but that's besides the point in this episode.
We ain't going there today.
We ain't going there today. We don't got time to go there today. So currently in 2022, he's sixth in the standings with 77 points. And I know we're going to talk about it a little later, but they are not having nearly as bad as the season as everybody thinks they are. So we've got only 2 finishes outside of the points, and most of them are 3rd, 4th, 6th, 5th, 8th, 4th, 3rd, and been on the podium twice, once in Bahrain for the season opener, and then just last weekend in Canada. So comparatively, Lewis is not as quote unquote strong as he was in seasons past, but it's a new era. And then, well, I want to get into all of the records because it is just, when I read these to you, you will be shocked at all of the ones that he holds. And this is as of April 22nd this year, so just a couple months ago. And most of these still hold to this day, but that's when the article was cited. So most F1 wins, most points in F1, and most F1 wins, most points in F1, most consecutive race starts, most entries with a single engine manufacturer, most consecutive points finishes, total pole positions, most podium finishes, most total race finishes within the points, the highest average points per race started, the most consecutive race finishes, the total laps led, the total races leading every lap, total poles and wins in the same race, and the only driver to win a race in every season completed. And those are just the records he holds himself. He's also sharing records with Michael Schumacher for the most championships at 7, Jacques Villeneuve with the most wins in their first championship season, which is 4. Schumi with the most wins at the same Grand Prix, which is 8. Senna with the most consecutive wins at the same GP, which is the Spanish GP for Lewis, which was 5 years in a row. Again, with Schumi for the most consecutive seasons with at least 1 Grand Prix win. 15. He has 15 consecutive seasons with at least 1 win. So every single year he's been in this sport. And then most podium finishes in a season, 17. He's tied with Schumi and Vettel on that one. And then finally, he's also tied with Jacques Villeneuve for the fewest world championship seasons before his first title, which is 2. So if you don't think Lewis Hamilton is the greatest of all time in Formula One, then you need to do some studying and do some research and maybe listen to this segment a couple times over and over to realize how great he is. And not only is he great on track, but he is great off track. He has been credited with furthering F1's global following with his high-profile lifestyle, environmental and social activism, and his interests in both music and fashion, which are all the things that he is focusing on when he's not on track. I think I actually just took his master class, and I have a bunch of notes from it that I could talk more about, but I think my favorite section of the class itself was when he talks about all of his other interests outside of Formula One. And at first people said that, those were distractions for him and that he wasn't focused, but he really talks about how being interested in more than one thing is so crucial because it's training different parts of your brain. It's allowing you to take breaks. And if you want to take the class, I will happily share my masterclass login, but it was just great to hear him talk more about how he grew up in karting and in the racing world, and he was one of the only Black men with him and his father on the track and went through hate and criticism because of his race, and we've seen now how much he has accomplished. And so again, he is just so wonderful, so great, humble, honest, true, and just very genuine. And that's just from us following him and not even getting to know him. So super great. And to this day, continues to push for increased diversity in motorsport itself. He started the Hamilton Commission in 2020. Time magazine named him one of the most influential people globally. And then he was knighted in 2021. So he should be referred to as Sir Lewis Hamilton. And that's all I've got for him.
The cutest thing is that his niece and nephew call him Sir Uncle. I think that's the sweetest nugget I've learned about his life lately. What makes me so impressed by him is that at every turn, at every single moment of any bit of adversity, his response is not to like hide or push away from it, but to like forge on. And for a lot of people, that's really inspiring. But I think for all of us, it's a lesson that like no matter how much shit happens, you still have to keep doing what you love. And he has done that, and he truly is like a what you would consider like a modern Renaissance man, in the sense that he can kind of do a little bit of everything, and he does a little bit of everything pretty damn good. I mean, hell, he can teach his dog to skateboard.
That I know, I didn't even mention Roscoe. Yeah, he's got a wonderful
dog
bulldog.
dad.
Proud dog dad, which is super important to Megan and I. So just another thing to make you love him.
Just know that there's no chance in hell I'll ever be able to teach my dogs to skateboard, but somehow Lewis Hamilton managed to do it. So he's still beating me in life. Okay, let's talk about Lewis's teammate, George Russell, who joined Mercedes this year. And when I say that I love George Russell, I didn't used to love George Russell. I kind of thought he was a little quiet, a little meek. And now I've decided that he is really, truly not only one of the greatest drivers on track, he's underestimated. And oftentimes I think has been boiled down to just being like he's a great driver, but he was at Williams, and he's like a good driver at Mercedes, but Lewis, like I think he's always kind of been like an asterisk is what I'm going to say. Like he's phenomenal, but I don't know if people have always like given him the praise and recognition that he deserved, or actually really like tried to learn about him, because there's not really like that much on the internet compared to some drivers. So I will say that it was great fun to kind of follow along with what he was up to this weekend. This past weekend, he was at the Goodwin's Festival of Speed. So that was really fun. He'd been there previously, but this time as like a fully fledged Mercedes driver. So that was really fun to watch. He seems like the kindest, nicest, like most gentlemanly human on earth. And I just freaking love that. I feel like that video of him like pulling the reporter out of the way as a TV crew was going down. Like it's the little things like that, the clips you see of him that make you realize that he's more than just, it's George Russell. But overall, I think he's fucking great. I think he is most definitely the future of Mercedes. None of us want to admit that there is a day that Lewis Hamilton won't be on the track, but he has other interests, and at some point he is going to go and pursue them. So this move for George Russell was definitely a play to secure kind of like a future leader for the team, and solidify the team having kind of like the next generation coming up. Almost kind of like what I would say they did with Lewis Hamilton, bringing him in to partner with Nico Rosberg after Michael Schumacher left, in the sense of like, let's prepare for the next round of drivers to come through. I have done some mild thinking about what happens and who will eventually be George's teammate, and I really truly can't solidify those thoughts because I refuse to acknowledge that Lewis won't be here one day. He has made his career, George Russell has made his career off the idea of being Mr. Saturday. He has always been known to always out-qualify his teammate. In fact, in his first year in F1, he out-qualified Robert Kubica at all 21 Grand Prix his rookie year, which is pretty freaking impressive. Honestly, I've made the conscious decision here to not go into a ton of the Williams stats, and really, because that will derail both Katie and I into a what the L conversation, a what the Latifi conversation, and we don't want to go there today. But this year, I really want to this episode, I really want to focus on where George Russell is and Mercedes. I would like to point out here that I'm going to throw a ton of stats in comparison to Lewis because that's really the only barometer to compare him to, because it is Mercedes, and in Formula One, your greatest competition is your teammate. However, I would like to point out that I don't think that any of these stats really show, I don't want them to come off as like me hating on Lewis. I think this really just shows that George Russell has been able to capitalize. And I think that comes from having a shit box of a car for the last couple of years, that now he's like, look, I'm used to a shit box. Toto Wolff even calls it a shit box. So this year at Mercedes, George Russell has outqualified Lewis 6 of the 9 times. Fucking impressive. Keeping his name Mr. Saturday. But really, I think the better nickname for him is Mr. Sunday. He is the only driver to be in the points at all 9 rounds this year. He is the only driver to still be in the top 5 of all 9 rounds here. So everyone go ahead and knock on wood, light a candle so that I didn't just jinx that. But it is clear by those stats that he has outperformed Lewis 7-2 this year. Again, not a knock on Lewis. I'm just celebrating Russell's ability to, 1, move into that position in Mercedes, 2, to showcase his ability at Mercedes, and 3, to kind of be there to like catch the team when things have gone wrong, when they maybe have experimented on Hamilton and got the setup wrong, which we know has been true again and again and again as Mercedes has battled porpoising all year. So yes, I think we dub him Mr. Sunday, at least for now. Before he got these stupid nicknames and started, taking his shirt off and dumping water on himself. You know what I'm talking about.
I can't believe you brought that up.
You know what I'm talking about. The man likes to be naked.
Not in the middle of an episode, Megan.
The man likes to be naked on the internet. He likes when people take pictures of his naked chest. I got to drop it here. Way before that. Way back. Let's take it back to 2006. He was age 7. Freaks me out that he was 7 in 2006. I'm not going to lie. He started karting. In karting, he spent wow, words from 2000. I'm still thinking about George Russell and his naked body. Whoops. George Russell was in karting from 2006 until 2011. He won a ton of awards, which I could list out here, but he definitely showcased his ability at a young age to be competitive on the track. In 2009, he was the MSA British Cadet Champion. He was the British Open champion in 2010. He was the Super 1 British champion. He was also the Formula Kart Stars British champion. He won Kart Masters British Grand Prix. One day we need to go into all of these different series. In 2011, He was the CIK FIA European Junior Champion, and he actually was that in 2012 and 2013. So he had a very impressive karting career. And then in 2014, he moved into his first year in single-seater. Then in 2015, he was in Formula 3. Again, in 2016, he was in Formula 3. In 2016, he finished P3 with 2 wins and 10 podiums. But really, 2017 in GP3 is where it was like, time for Mercedes to make their move. In January of that year, Mercedes announced that they were going to bring him into their young drivers program and officially be part of like the Mercedes, I don't want to use the word Death Star, but I feel like that Mercedes Empire. We'll go with Empire. That's a little less awful. In GP3, he took 4 wins, 7 podiums, and had 4 poles. He won the Drivers' Championship with 2 races left, and he was able to participate in some F1 free practice outings. So, again, just working his way up the ladder. In 2018, he was in Formula 2. He was a Mercedes reserve driver. He had the most poles, the most laps led, the most total podiums, despite having significant reliability issues. He was crowned the champion with his 7th win in Abu Dhabi. That year, he beat Lando Norris, which is why there's that PowerPoint presentation. You know what I'm talking about. Is iconic.
I know. Were you watching that the other day?
Yes, I was.
Yes, you were. When we were together, we were together,
and you were
weekend,
napping.
And I was napping, well, half napping, and she was rewatching the PowerPoint presentation.
It's so funny.
It's hilarious.
The best part is when he's like, you can't lose positions if you start 19th. Iconic moment. I laughed hysterically. I still laugh hysterically. If you're ever sad, go watch that video. In 2018, he announced his move to Formula One with Williams. And ultimately, like the one comparison I want to make here is that he had a kind of a similar path, in fact, the same similar path as Charles Leclerc, in the fact that he won back-to-back GP3 and then F2. So he won GP3 in 2016 and F2 in 2017. Charles Leclerc was just earlier, so it's kind of interesting to like compare some of that earlier success with drivers to know like why they also got a seat, like what kind of constitutes getting that position in F1. So let's look at his Formula One career. In 2019, he was Williams. In 2020, he was with Williams. And let me tell you, the man outperformed the car, which is why I think he's having such a, I don't want to say easy, such a
consistent.
He's less affected by the fact that his car is underperforming this year. He had 9 Q2 appearances, and 2020 was the year that he replaced Hamilton at the Shakir Grand Prix due to COVID. Let me tell you, he will even tell you that this race was one of his massive setbacks. I'm going to talk about that article that I found here in a second, but it was an incredible performance that ultimately resulted in just heartbreak for George Russell. He qualified P2 just 0.026 seconds behind Bottas. I'm sorry. Showed up, got in the Mercedes, did that. I mean, the car was great, don't get me wrong, but still, he hadn't really driven it. And he'd gone from a literal shitbox to a Mercedes. Like, what a change of what a massive shift overnight. Unfortunately, that race would just go real bad. Real bad. He had a pit stop issue, then there was a puncture, and he was essentially denied his maiden victory, which, let me tell you, all of us were hoping was going to happen, because how great of a story would that be? In 2021, he was back with Williams, and here he earned his first podium at Spa. Qualified P2, podiumed P2, moving on.
In a Williams. I'm still not over that.
Okay, the qualifying, incredible. The podium, I feel actually bad that his first podium was such a tsunami. I was going to say dumpster fire, but it was a wet race. We got to go with tsunami.
Tsunami.
Like I mentioned a minute ago, one of the coolest articles I actually found about George Russell, there's not a lot out there really deep diving into him, but one of the coolest articles was one about his 4 most brutal setbacks, one of which I already mentioned, which was 2020, the Shakir Grand Prix. He said it was an emotional roller coaster. It was an emotional roller coaster for us watching, so I can't imagine what was happening in that damn car. But on top of that, a couple of other major setbacks, all of which he concludes kind of transformed him into the driver he is today and why he is going to be or is a good Mercedes driver. So the first one happened at the 2020 Tuscan Grand Prix, where he dropped out of the points after running in them. It would have been Williams' first point since Germany in 2019, and heartbreaking. Then again in 2020 at Emilia-Romagna, at Imola, he crashed out behind the safety car as he was running in P10. So 2 opportunities to earn points for a team that was grasping, like looking for the last drop of water as they're dying for thirst. And then finally, the fourth one, that he claims is his biggest setback is 2021 Emilia-Romagna, where he crashed with Bottas when fighting for P9. It was brutal emotionally, but what astonishes me about him is that after all 4 of these horrific setbacks, some in a Mercedes and some not in a Mercedes and some against a legitimate Mercedes driver that he would soon replace, he has not like had a step back in his development as a driver. He's used those setbacks to actually fuel him into making him a better driver, a good driver, a great driver, and I think really truthfully a future world champion. Like, I have no doubt that he will be a world champion, just like I have no doubt that Charles Leclerc will be one, and I have no doubt that Carlos Sainz will be one. It will just take a bit of time. So we finally get to 2022. I know we're not going to go into the whole Netflix show scene where, Toto finally tells him, because we basically know that it was faked. But nonetheless, George Russell, 2022, he is a Mercedes driver. He's in the black suit driving the Silver Arrow. And it's been really fun to watch. I've really loved it. And I think he is completely shown that he not only deserves this spot, but deserves to one day like lead the Mercedes team, all while doing it so humbly and constantly talking about how much he's learned from Lewis, which I think is the right play for George Russell. Don't anger the veteran, learn from the veteran. And luckily he has a veteran like Lewis who is willing to teach, to be a mentor, to be a role model. It has been awesome to see him kind of sneak in and benefit from those DNFs of Red Bull and Ferrari to maximize points in a car that isn't great. But also, all of that doesn't discount the fact that he has had some spectacular drives, and it's been really fun to watch. So yeah, shout out to George Russell, and if you're not a fan, get on board.
I think the one thing about George being in a Mercedes this year that has puzzled me was the first couple races, it felt so weird to me, and I couldn't figure out why it felt so weird that he was in a Mercedes. But now that we are 9 rounds in and it feels more normal, I've realized that this whole time it has felt normal and right, and it has felt good and has made sense. And at first it felt weird because I didn't understand that it felt so good, and it was weird that it felt so good so quick, but I've been thoroughly impressed, and I simply cannot wait to see how he continues, because he's not been called Mr. Consistency for any one reason. He has just come out and shown us that he knows what he's doing, and he has finally been put in a car that can perform a little bit better than a Williams ever could.
So yeah, come on, Lewis. Come on, George. We're going to need a win out of both of you. Lewis to continue the streak, and Russell because it's about damn time.
This podcast is brought to you by Racing Thread, Formula One clothing for any occasion.
Their clothing features subtle, evocative, embroidered designs for your favorite F1 moments.
From Ricardo's Monza shoey to Sebastian's Australian scooter ride.
From Lewis's Brazilian comeback to Carlando's round of golf.
Whether you're out to dinner with friends, watching the race at home, or cheering in the grandstands,
gone are the embarrassing sponsor logos. Instead, Racing Thread is F1 clothing you are comfortable wearing anywhere.
Right now, Dirty Driving listeners can get 15% off Racing Thread's entire range of t-shirts, sweatshirts, and polos using the code Dirty Driving.
That's Dirty Driving, all capitals, no spaces, for 15% off their entire clothing range.
Head over to racingthread.com to shop F1 racewear for anywhere.
Okay, so that brings us to the wonderful section about Mercedes history. There's a lot of history here with Mercedes that I'm going to dive into. This is just like, I would like to say that this isn't even like the top of the iceberg. This is maybe like the snowflake on top of the iceberg of all of the rich history that Mercedes-Benz has as not only a car manufacturer, but then also into motorsports. So bear with me. We're going to skip some things. I made some choices here to talk about the things that I wanted to talk about. So if you don't like it, don't care. So let's do it. It is actually crazy to me that a team that has been dominant in the most recent years has actually not really been on the grid all that much when you think about it in terms of like the history of Formula One. For the majority of it, they weren't there. They took a break from 1955 to 1994, my birth year, when they returned as an engine supplier. But really, they didn't come back to the grid until 2010 when they returned as a constructor. So long time away, but somehow some of and most of the accolades end up with them. The Brackley-based team is currently headed by our guy, Toto Wolff. No, Michael, no, Toto Wolff. Starring Lewis Hamilton and George Russell as their current drivers. They have had a year marked by struggles and yet are somehow still third in the constructors. So I really don't think it's been as bad as everyone is saying, but I think it has something to do with like the drop comparatively. We're going to get to that. Don't worry. But before we do all of that, let's chat about some of their impressive records to go along with those Lewis Hamilton impressive records for having I can't get over the fact that they have these records that they were out of the game or off the track for so much of the history. They have 8 consecutive championships consecutively from 2014 to 2021. They have 9 drivers' championships, should be 10. Their first one is 1954 with Juan Manuel Fangio. He won again in 1955. Then we have Lewis Hamilton in 14 and 15. We have Nico Rosberg in 16, which we will one day do a full episode on the rivalry between Rosberg and Hamilton. It's not going to be today. Hate to break it to you. But then we go back to Lewis for 2017 to 2020. They have 115 first place finishes. They have 127 pole positions, and they have 85 fastest laps. Damn, is all I'm going to say. Incredible. So in 2019, Mercedes F1 as an entity, or Mercedes-Benz Daimler, celebrated their 125 years in motorsport. Not Formula One, but motorsport. They were into motorsporting before motor racing was even a thing. I think we can probably attribute a lot of the start of motorsport to them in a sense, because they really kind of were there at the beginning. The car company, whose name is given to the team, was created by a merger of a German industrial machine production company called Benz and Company. I'm going to skip the German words because I'm going to butcher them. And a German engineering company, Daimler. More German words that I can't pronounce. I'm really sorry. I would do it, but I don't want to butcher it. And that happened in 1926. So the new company was formed under the name Daimler-Benz. Today it's known as Daimler AG. I hate to admit this, but I'm going to do it because this is where I admit all of my stupidity. AG, I thought for the longest time, meant Autogruppen. No. It means a very long German word, which I'm not going to pronounce because I will butcher it, which literally translates to stock corporation or shares corporation in English. So it has nothing to do with a car, AG. It just means it is a stocked corporation. The first motorsport race of all motorsport races took place in 1894. It was from Paris to Roussillon run, where it was not just about who crossed the finish line first, but it was how easy the cars were to operate and ultimately like kind of their reliability with that operation and reliability. 2 of the cars that started the competition of horseless carriages, great name, think we should bring that back, had engines built and developed by Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach, who were 2 of the creators of Daimler, that side of the corporation in the merger. This led to a long Daimler-Maybach partnership, and it most importantly led to their engines and their ability to produce quality engines and cars becoming well known, and ultimately the founding of the Automobile Club de France, which would then host a proper race in 1894, which was from Paris to Bordeaux and back. This is wild, Katie, and I'm going to need your thoughts on this here. The first proper motorsport established the principle that the fastest car was the car that wins, which to me sounds really funny because that's something that like you would never question. But actually, it does make sense that they had to establish that that was what motorsport was about, that it was about the fastest winning and not about the most reliable or the quickest on a straight. Like, to me, it blows my mind that they had to even establish the principle that it was the fastest car wins.
Yeah, that's just a given. It's like
well,
the
it's
first
like
one to
given
cross
for us
the finish line. Like, mind blowing.
Well, it kind of makes sense that they had to establish that because the year before in that race, like they also awarded points to like cars on their operation and reliability. So like imagine if in our world of Formula One, if like, yes, the car that finished first got points, but also like the most reliable or easiest to drive got points. Like how would like, there was it would be like a figure skating score. You would get points for different things.
That would be actually so interesting to see. Like the most reliable gets 3 extra points a race, and see how that would vary past championships.
I have like no idea how that would work, but it's like mind blowing that they had to have that principle be established. Like they'd been racing horses for years. I don't know. Just thought it was kind
Crazy.
of wild. A nugget of
No, that is wild.
something to ponder. Like, think about what motorsport would be like if it wasn't the fastest. Or I guess not necessarily the fastest, but it was the first to cross the finish line. Which are technically two different things. Okay, so the motorsport team found success before World War I, but it was really their return in the 1930s that started a great era of racing. They returned in 1934 with funding from the German government. The team was led by Alfred Neubauer. They battled against their rival, Auto Union, for 5 years. Rudolf Caracola won the newly formed European Championship, not related to the championship we know today, that wasn't established until 1950, in 1935, 1937, and 1938. In 1939, ahead of World War II, they had to withdraw from Grand Prix racing. Don't think I need to explain that too much. However, we're going to take a pause here and talk about the fact that in the 1930s is when the alleged nickname of the Silver Arrows came about. Now, this story is wild to me. There are actually two competing stories here, Katie. One is backed by some facts, and the other one is kind of backed by legend. The facts are that silver was the color, or silver or white was the color of all German racing cars. So it was given to both Mercedes and their competitor AutoNation. So a country's car could be more recognizable when they were racing. So like Italy was red, Britain was dark green, France was blue. Just imagine like literally all the home race cars this weekend being all dark green. We had a hard enough time identifying the drivers as it is. So the story goes that like both AutoNation and Mercedes were technically nicknamed the Silver Arrows because they were both silver. The legend, which is like, you know, shrouded in mystery, and of course Mercedes hypes up, and I'm fucking hyping up. I love a good legend, comes from Alfred Neubauer. He accounts that they actually started racing as silver cars by accident. The story goes that in 1934, the W25 was too heavy ahead of the Eifel Run at the Nürburgring. So to meet the 750 kilogram maximum, they like stripped the paint off of the car, which was a lead-based paint, so it would literally be able to meet the maximum. Like they were literally stripping pounds off. They were doing what they're doing today. Yeah, it doesn't make as much sense today because it's not lead-based paint.
No, it's silly, but whatever.
The story goes they were stripping the white paint off of the car so it would lose the lead weight, but it would leave the car with the like silver aluminum color. So the next day, Manfred von Brautich won the race, and the media started calling the Mercedes cars the Silver Arrows. And it's all because of this one incident of stripping the paint. I love this legend. I think it's, you know, I love a good, like, we did this crazy wild thing and then they won. I love things like that.
I love that.
It's probably not true. It's been contested many, many times with people citing the fact that, like, both Mercedes and Auto Union raced silver cars, like, you know, ahead of 1934. But it persists, and I have to believe that the truth is somewhere in the middle, but it is something that, like, the media gave them, and then they, of course, like, hyped up. There are some quotes, you know, where they're like, you can't beat a silver arrow. That's not the exact words, but similar to that. I also would like to point out that I feel like Mercedes made it cool to strip paint before it was cool to strip paint.
Oh, they can win that. They can have that for sure.
So, flash forward, due to World War II, obviously German international racing ceased. Most auto racing ceased, if there was any. I don't actually think there was a single race during that time period. However, the company would return in 1955 for the Le Mans 24-hour. It was actually 1954. I'm sorry, because that was when Germany was reinstated into the international motor racing like community again after the war. They would also return to Grand Prix racing in 1954. They returned.
Sorry. I have a question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. You said that they returned in 1954. Did they have to sit out a couple of years before, due to like
Yeah, they were.
What they did
German
in World
auto
War
racing
II?
was not allowed to participate. Like they had to be let back in to the
Okay.
racing community. So they missed years.
Cool.
They had to have missed years.
Okay.
Because they weren't allowed. I don't actually.
Oh yeah, 1954 started in 1950. Yeah. Okay, just wanted to
Yes.
clarify that. Thank you for clarifying.
Dates are hard. Dates are really hard. And this part
Yeah.
of like the early history is like a little tricky. So they return in mid 1954. They return at the 4th round. They return at the French Grand Prix. And this time, they still have the same leader, Alfred Neubauer, but they have Argentinian driver Juan Manuel Fangio, who transferred from Maserati to Mercedes after winning a driver's championship. He would go on to win that season with 4 pole positions and 4 wins. I'd like to point out he came in late. They showed up at the 4th round, so impressive. Then in 1955, they had their first full season. It was a success with another 4 pole positions and then 5 of the 7 wins. Juan Manuel Fangio would win the drivers' championship with 4 out of the 5 wins for Mercedes. But what's so cool is Sterling Moss won his home Grand Prix race. So I feel like this is a moment. I don't know. I'm making shit up. Unfortunately, I'm just like bullshitting now. Unfortunately, after the June 1955 tragedy at the Le Mans, a Mercedes driver, Pierre Laveau, was involved in like a horrific, it was a horrific crash that killed him and 80 spectators, if I am correct. It's considered to be one of the most catastrophic crashes in motorsport history, but Daimler-Benz would withdraw from the sport at the end of that season. So they had a very successful running in Formula One. Then they had a tragedy at the Le Mans, and they said, we are done. They would not return to Formula One until 1994, when they returned to supply engines after purchasing a stake in the British manufacturer Ilmor. It was a 25% stake at that time. It would ultimately grow, and they would be the sole owner in 2005. In 1994, they initially provided engines to Sauber, but in 1995, they partnered with McLaren. They actually purchased a 40% stake in into McLaren, making it kind of a de facto Mercedes team. And then under this McLaren-Mercedes partnership, that would continue from 1995 to 2014, but they would, in that collaboration, win 78 races, one constructor's title in 1998 with Mika Häkkinen. They would win another driver's championship with Mika Häkkinen in 1999, and then in 2008 with Lewis Hamilton. So technically, Lewis Hamilton has always kind of won with Mercedes.
Yes, he has.
Then they would make the decision to become a works team, a constructors team again. In 2009, they acquired the 2009 World Champions Braun Grand Prix to return as a constructor under the name Mercedes GP Petronas Formula One Team. In that year, they would bring in drivers Michael Schumacher and Nico Rosberg. Schumacher would race for them for 3 years before retiring, and the team would acquire Lewis Hamilton and begin domination in 2014. Wow, years are really hard. I have just come to realize that the noughts and the teens of the 2000s all are, to me, just the noughts. Like, I can't wrap my head around it. What's really interesting about Mercedes is that they have supplied engines to Lotus, Manor, Force India / Racing Point / Aston Martin, Williams, and McLaren. They currently still supply engines to Aston Martin, Williams, and McLaren, who announced in 2019 that from 2021 they would continue to supply McLaren engines and continue that partnership between them. So it's fucking impressive. Their domination, their history is impressive, and really, I mean, I'm into the Legend of the Silver Arrows. I am mad that they went back to being silver this year, though. Still pissed about it.
Yeah, the black was sexy.
The black was so sexy at night. That's all I care about. They just need the black car for all night races.
We could pitch that. We could pitch that for them to bring back.
Also, at one of these days, they need to go to matte black. She's dying.
La la. Oh my God.
Toto, call me.
We are sending them a DM after this.
Let's go to matte black and let's put Lewis and George in like black racing suits. Like just an all black look. Matte sunglasses,
No
matte
logos.
helmets. Matte
Wow.
helmets. Okay. I've
Yeah,
lost,
I'm
I've lost the
daydreaming
whole
now.
thing.
She's
I've
lost me.
the whole
She's
thing.
she's lost me with the matte helmet.
It was really interesting to learn about them. I'm more intrigued now to learn about all of the business behind it, like all the mergers that happened from, essentially when Daimler and Maybach started working together all the way until Benz joined in. And then really you need to kind of study both of the companies independently and then how they interacted with one another. That's part of their history that I'm not really sure everyone would be super into. I didn't go into it here, but it's something that's definitely on my list to kind of dissect a little bit more.
Yeah, I think any team's history of how they came to be, who they came to be, and why they are the way they are. I'm so glad we're doing this series because I've learned so much, whether it's me teaching you or you teaching me about who these teams really are and why they exist to this day and why they go racing every weekend.
It's kind of cool to learn about their like little nuggets of kind of weirdness, like this weird Silver Arrows story. It's interesting to hear about, all the like old school stuff that happens, like that they participated in the first ever motor race and that technically Gottlieb and Maybach, supplied the 2 winning engines. Like it's interesting all of the early connections that happened that I don't know if exist anymore because the teams are a little bit more like independent.
And separated from each other in more than one way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Megan. So here's my question. Here's our question that we have to answer before our time's up today. Is Mercedes as far behind as everyone thinks? Is this really the dumpster fire of the year that the media are portraying it to be? Or are they actually doing pretty decent?
I mean, you want me to start my rant now or like, where do we want to go with this?
Where do we want to start? I think you give us the numbers. Talk to us a little bit about what this season looks like and how well we've actually been doing, and then we can, talk a little bit more.
Okay, so here's my thing about the numbers. They look pretty shit if you compare them to years previous. But are they really shit when you have the team principal literally calling the car a shitbox? I don't think so.
No.
That's my argument. They can't really be that bad if the car itself is, quote, undrivable by Lewis on some days, not all days. So currently, Russell sits P4 in the championship. He is 14 points behind Leclerc. That is a DNF from Ferrari away. Lewis Hamilton is P6. He is 34 points behind Russell, and the driver between the two of them is Carlos Sainz. Again, a Ferrari DNF away. Let's look at the team championship. Again, not great when you look at the numbers. They currently sit with 188 points. They're 40 points behind Ferrari and 116 points behind Red Bull, but they are well clear of McLaren in P4, which only has 65 points. So it almost feels like Red Bull is here, then there's like Ferrari, and then there's Mercedes, and then there's like everybody else.
They're still in the top 3 leading teams. I think it would be very different if we as Mercedes were in P5 or below.
I mean, if they were losing to like Alpine and McLaren on the regular, if they were losing to Aston Martin on the regular, then I'd be saying this is a dumpster fire of a year. I will say that, look, if you look at the whole season, it's clear that there's 2 things. First off, they have spent up until Barcelona, and really they say Barcelona, but I think it's more like Canada, trying to figure out the porpoising. They're not developing the car, they're fixing a problem. Then you look at Canada. Friday, Lewis says that car is undrivable. Saturday, he qualifies P4. Sunday, he's on the podium. We saw it. Just a reminder. it's very clear that that car is on the edge. It's either gonna function or it's not gonna function. And it seems like Lewis Hamilton has been, a little bit maybe on the edge of like, well, we know this. He's been on the like, let's experiment with his car. Whereas we've just had George Russell being like, let me just scoop up with the leftovers after the Ferrari and the Red Bulls are done.
And I think you made a very intelligent point earlier on about saying that George is used to driving a quote-unquote shitbox of a car and getting maximum performance out of the vehicle itself, whereas Lewis in the past couple of years has been gifted with a dominating vehicle and could be struggling with the fact that it is on edge when he's used to. I'm not saying he's not a great driver and can't figure it out. I want to be clear about that, but could be struggling with the fact that it's not as easy as it has been in past years.
I mean, it's hard to tame. You've got to get the setup correct. If the setup's wrong, you're fucked. We saw that. We literally have seen that. Baku, they pushed that car way too hard for performance, and then both Lewis and George were like, my back hurts. And there was a question if Lewis was going to race or not the next week in Canada. We have seen that this car, like, clearly can perform. We saw nuggets of it in Barcelona. We saw nuggets of it in Canada. We've seen nuggets of it with George Russell all year. But that's been interspliced by, like, Emilia Romagna, where Lewis Hamilton gets out of the car and he's distraught. He spent most of the race behind Pierre Gasly, and he was lapped by Max Verstappen. Then we have Monaco, where he spent most of the time stuck behind Fernando Alonso's big ass rear end of an Alpine. Then we have then we're back at Baku. I can't go into that again. That's still traumatic for me.
Very traumatic. It's been up and down, roller coaster, moving side to side, and I would like to think that we are on the path towards being in a better spot, especially after we did see a podium finish in Canada. But you're right again in saying, like, if the setup's not correct, then the setup's not correct.
I'm going to pull this up because there is someone tweeted out the interview with one of the Mercedes. Tweeted out a quote from James Allison. He said, everyone in our factory doesn't dare say it, but we are cautiously optimistic of having a more competitive weekend. I think some of the characteristics of the circuit will suit the car. So, look, I'm hoping for a more competitive Mercedes this weekend. Historically, it's been a good track for them. Granted, it was a different car. It was smooth. It's a smoother track than the last three, but it's not Barcelona. It seems like after Canada, they seem to not only be getting a handle on really fixing the car, but they've been getting a handle on how to extract performance for the car. But ultimately, I don't really know if, like, this year, like Mercedes, like, obviously Toto Wolff is like, I want to win. He said in freaking Drive to Survive, everybody's our enemy, which he's making them. We'll get to the technical directive here in a second. But I don't know at what point they're going to be like, look, we're going to get through this year. We're going to get as many points as we can. But at some point, we need to start considering, like, throw our eggs in next year's basket. And then come out, like, ready to fight next year.
And I could see them knowing with where they sit now and where they will sit maybe by round 14 or 15 in 4 to 5 races, we may see that switch over by them faster than anyone else.
Or, hell, let's talk about this. Red Bull and Ferrari have been DNFing up and down the year. What happens at the end of the day if both both Red Bull and Ferrari just DNF their way to Mercedes being like number 2?
They're on the track to do so.
At this rate, I mean, we had Checo out. We had Checo out in Canada. Red Bull and Ferrari have like a 4-3 DNF ratio. Could it just be that Mercedes kind of just sits here and is like, let me just swipe through the points like George Russell has been doing all year?
And Mercedes hasn't DNF'd once.
No.
Yeah, because no, they haven't.
Is this going to be the year where it's not about like performance might be great up front, which is what I keep calling Red Bull Mercedes, which is what Red Bull did. They brought upgrades early. They went for a massive like forward campaign grabbing points. I mean, it doesn't look like they're planning based on what we've seen out of or heard from the Red Bull camp. It doesn't seem like they're planning a massive upgrade between now and the summer break. So is it the Mercedes time to like gobble up and limit that damage so that the back half of the season they're like, okay, let's go for at least P2.
And being also mindful of how much money has been spent thus far on upgrades and how much money has not been spent thus far on upgrades
Which, by the way, for anybody listening, we are going to talk about the whole inflation thing after this weekend. I want to hear what they say at the press conferences. So that will come. But in terms of what we're talking about right now, we're taking that kind of equation out of it. I mean, the other thing is like what happens with the technical directives. The FAA, we talked about it last week. The FAA issued a technical directive about an acceptable level of bouncing and a planned way to measure it. We had some meetings. We don't know yet.
I may ask a pointed question
Yes.
that has been thrown around a little bit. Do you feel as though this technical directive came out just because Mercedes was the ones complaining the most?
Look, drivers other than Mercedes have been quoted complaining about it. I do think, though, when you have the de facto face of Formula One and the 8 consecutive world champions saying this is a safety issue, the FIA has to do something for nothing other than, and this is where I don't like the FIA. I think they're doing it to save face. I don't think they're necessarily like, let's do this for the safety of the drivers. But when those two people call you out, you kind of got to follow it suit. So I think there's a lot up in the air. I think we're going to definitely know more about Mercedes and their trajectory after Silverstone, because I think what happens at Silverstone might be indicative of what happens in France.
And tell us about the upgrades that we may see in Silverstone.
Well, I for sure know that they are going. Well, not for sure. The rumor is they're going to test that floor that they tested on Friday in Canada. That the floor that Bonotto was like, how the hell did you make this overnight? And Mercedes was like, we made it overnight. And Ferrari's like, we can't do that. And Mercedes like, well, we could do it. That ultimately led to a massive disagreement where Bonotto and Wolff are apparently yelling at each other in the paddock. I would have loved to see it.
Little spicy moment.
There also is a rumor that Mercedes potentially might have gotten a heads up about the change coming down the pipeline due to a former Mercedes employee. That would be spicy, and I don't think Mercedes is stupid. But if they are, they're fucked.
Yeah, that would be a blow up for sure. An absolute blow up.
But ultimately, we've ultimately concluded that, yes, it's been a shitty year by Mercedes standards, but it hasn't been a year considering the undrivable shitbox.
I still think, in my mind, it has been quite a decent year considering what all is going on.
I mean, when you go wild and show up with no side pods, you're the only team that goes rogue. It's either going to be great success or a trial and tribulation. And I think they're just facing that trial and tribulation right now. That brings us to our favorite part of the deep dive episodes. Your 4 reasons why you should be a fangirl boy person of Mercedes. Katie, give me your number 1.
Well, you know what I'm going to say. I got to go with this one. The Lewis Hamilton legacy. 7 world championships. Well, 6 with Mercedes, technically 7 if you count the McLaren Mercedes engine. And yeah, I mean, everything that he's done for the sport, everything that he's done for the team, he is a legend. I will not read all of those standing records again. You can feel free to rewind and go listen to them again. But yeah, his legacy and the legacy that he's creating and the legacy that he will leave for Mercedes and F1.
Mine is kind of a given, but I mean, it might have been annoying that they were winning all the time, but like, damn, I kind of miss a competitive Mercedes. I miss them being a little bit more in the fight. And not because I'm like, I want them to win every time, but because I really liked, or I was hoping for a Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes kind of competition. I wanted a 3-team fight and not necessarily a 2-team fight.
Number 3, their 8-time world championship dynasty. I know it's similar to my Lewis Hamilton legacy, but how can you not be a fan of a team who has dominated for 8 years? You've got to root for them. One little part of you has to root for them, even if you hate them.
She's going for the past accolades, and I'm going for the future. Number 4, George Russell. Come on. Everyone's got to be psyched for George Russell. I really, truthfully, like, wholeheartedly believe that he will be a driver champion. And I cannot wait for that day. And I will wave a British flag outside my home for months on end in the middle of America on 4th of July weekend. I will drink tea while everyone is drinking Budweiser.
Up next is the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. It is the home race for Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and Aston Martin, and drivers Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and Lando Norris. This 52-lap Grand Prix is sure to bring some surprise and maybe some controversy. Let's just hope it's nothing like last year, because I simply do not know that F1 Twitter could handle a repeat of 2021.
They can't.
They can't. Silverstone is holy F1 ground, the site of the first Grand Prix, host of the inaugural Formula One World Championship in May of 1950. It was Giuseppe Farini of Alfa Romeo who took home victory. Could it happen again? Probably not, but it would be great fun. In 2018, Hamilton compared a flat-out lap at Silverstone to flying a fighter jet. It is an essential on the calendar, featuring some of the most challenging corners like Maggots, Beckett's, and Abbey. It's impossible to forget Cops, where Hamilton and Verstappen made contact on the opening lap last year and saw Verstappen hit the barrier at a force of 51 Gs. That was a good ad, Megan.
She's not laughing at the crash. She's adding that I added the G-forces. She knew that I was going to do that.
Yes. Mercedes have taken 8 of the last 10 British Grand Prix, missing out on the 2018 one and the 70th anniversary GP held in 2020. Will it be a win for any of the drivers or teams celebrating their home race, or will Horner and Red Bull make things right after last year's GP? Stay tuned for next week's episode to see who wins the Great British Race-Off.
It is. It's literally the Great British Race-Off. I've been waiting for this for a year. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Dirty Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
Until next time, stay dirty.